Hello. This is the second part of my poetry. There is a video on the basic figurative language, and now I'm going to get a little bit more in depth in some of the things that we can do when we're analyzing poems. One thing in different poems is going to be pulling out a symbol. And what symbolism is a symbol is something that stands for itself, but also something larger than itself. It could be a person, an animal, an inanimate object, or an action. So something as simple as a heart is universally known as love. It's a symbol. A little bit more in depth, we might look at an American flag and connect that to freedom. When we're reading a poem or literature in general, oftentimes different characters or different people in the poem will symbolize something else. Many times we'll see nature and it symbolizes something greater than just that. So let's look at an example together. This is a poem called Mother to Son by Langston Hughes. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor. There. But all the time, I's been a climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back up. Don't you set down on the steps, 'cause you finds it's kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I see still going, honey. I still be climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. So think of that staircase and what does it symbolize? What is her life like in comparison? Her life's not crystal stair. Hers has had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up. And the connection is that she's had a difficult life. Her life has been a hard one. That staircase symbolizes the life that she's gone through. Also, there's imagery in poetry, and this is really trying to create an image in the reader's mind. So, how do you do that? You use all five senses. You think about what do things sound like? What do they taste like? Is there an odor? Is there a touch or a feel along with what you're seeing? So think about describing a spaghetti dinner. You can describe what it looks like. You can describe how delicious it smells, but also the different tastes you get from it. If you think of the ocean, well, you can describe the sand that you're walking on, combined with the cold water, the sun that might be shining down, what that feels like, the salt taste in the air. What do you smell? Do you hear the waves crashing, the seagulls? All of those are important to incorporate to really describe to someone what it's like to be at the beach. So let's look at this. The old man took the handful of dust and sifted through his fingers. The starry night sky looked so beautiful that it begged him to linger. But he reluctantly left for home. The fragrance of spring flowers made her joyful. The sound of a drum in the distance attracted him. So we're kind of touching on those senses, everything that's going on. Not just what he sees, but also he's going to hear a drum in the distance. He's going to smell flowers. All these things tie in to really make this moment come to life, which is what good poetry should do. Free verse, well, that's a poetry with no rules. Just about anything goes. You kind of write it the way you want. Still has meaning. Um, it just doesn't follow traditional conventions. No punctuation isn't important or capitalization, rhyme scheme, rhythm, meter. None of that falls in. Here's a great little free verse poem called Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent hunches and then moves on. So it's just, it didn't have to follow specific rules, but talked about this fog coming over the harbor. And then it kind of gives life to it by comparing it to a cat. It comes on little cat feet. Okay, so then oftentimes we'll have allusions in poetry, and that's a connection to something else in history or often mythology and the Bible are two big ones that there's connections to. So if you see a connection and you don't understand it, and there's not a little helper key, you might want to look it up or try to figure out what it could be. Let's look at this. Nothing gold can stay. Then leaf then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. So Eden isn't just a name. There's a specific reason why that name was chosen. If you know the Bible, if you know the Christian Bible, you're going to connect it to where Adam and Eve were. They're in the Garden of Eden. And this is connecting specifically to that. So it's important to understand um, the like where these are coming from. When I tell you that poetry is like a puzzle, this is what I mean. It's a puzzle in your mind, making connections from one thing to another, whether it's through figurative language and comparisons with similes and metaphors, or if it's illusions and trying to figure out where they connect. And it's really fun when you first start making those connections and you're like, oh yeah, this connects to the Garden of Eden, the Eden sank to grief. I get it. Um, but oftentimes you might not, and you might have to look it up. But the more you look them up, the more that you will find connections. Another thing is like I said, you don't need to know everything in the world. There are really specific allusions. Most of them are going to connect to Greek mythology and the Bible, but history in general, you'll find connections to as well. Bring up a couple little pictures there, and hopefully looking at those helps you understand a little bit more of how to analyze the poems you're reading. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I will be back with talking more about how poems are set up and the rhythm of poetry in my third video.